Well, hi viewers, it's good to be with you. My name's Russ. I'm the pastor of New Life in North Lincolnshire. It's great to have you with us. But there's not only you with me, viewers. I have on screen here three incredibly good looking people who I am proud to say are sort of cousins of mine. And we have Faith Hudson. Hi, Faith. We have Tasha Oti. Hi, Tasha.
Hello.
And we have Samuel or Sam Oti. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
It's good. It's good to be with you. And they're here to help me, really, because I want to know more about issues regarding race and ethnicity. And particularly because most of the information I've read and most of the videos I've seen have been to do with older people, particularly middle-aged people. I wanted to learn a little bit from younger people. And I was racking my brains and I was thinking, I don't know many young people to talk to who want to hang around with a 56-year-old guy who's a white reverend. And suddenly I thought, do you know, I've got cousins. And here they are. And so I've convinced them to talk to me for maybe an hour max, just to help me wrap my head around some issues to do with race, ethnicity, and maybe for you viewers as well to help you. Can I ask a question of you, and maybe each of you can answer it? When people like me use terms like multiracial or biracial or mixed race, if I was talking about you and I said I've got three young, beautiful, mixed race cousins, is that a good phrase to use? Is it old hat now? Is it a problem? What do you prefer to be introduced as? If there was need for me to introduce you as, hey, clearly this looks odd, my cousins have got a different skin colour than me, people would think that's strange, what's going on there. Is mixed race a good term to use, or do you prefer something else?
I think for me, mixed race it just comes as normal to me. That's kind of what I introduce myself as. I've not really had anyone say anything different. Perhaps I've heard maybe the most is person of colour or coloured person, but I feel comfortable with mixed race, I think, because I am, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
Similarly to me, I'd say mixed race. At school it was half caste, which wasn't particularly pleasant.
Now, just remind me, Faith, how old are you? I know it's rude to ask, but this because some of this will come into, I guess, timings of when people were at school and things. So
I'm 20. I was going to say 27. That's Tasha. I'm 29.
Okay. So sort of 15 years ago at school, people would label you as half caste, would they?
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like something from the 60s.
Yeah, and only recently, and actually it got to a point where I would also say to others, I'm half caste, because that's what they understood me to be. So I took on that language. Only recently, I would say, mixed race has been used a lot more in terms like half caste have been completely left behind, which is great. Biracial is a fairly new one. I don't mind. I don't really like coloured. I don't think that, for me, that doesn't really sit right. But person of colour, fine. Mixed race, fine. Biracial, fine. They're all, that's been my experience.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Sam, what's been your experience of that kind of terminology?
So I just smart all the time. I would say I would classify myself as black or mixed race, either one. because I don't know. I just do, and most people don't think I am mixed race. So if they asked me and I said I'm mixed race, they probably wouldn't know. But I just sometimes classify myself as black or mixed race. It depends really. If someone says like, "Oh, you're a black person," I'll probably be like, "Yeah, I am, but I'm mixed race," you know. But yeah, so.
Okay, that's interesting because we all have, don't we, an internal dialogue and an internal vocabulary. And it's interesting because you said, Sam, that's what you would describe yourself as. And so just the girls, what would you say that internal vocabulary was? Is it more natural, say, Tash, for you to think of yourself as a person of colour, and you, Faith, think of yourself as mixed race? Is they the phrases that you would use in your head if someone came up to you and said, "Are you black?" or whatever?
I personally wouldn't use person of colour for myself. I've never really described myself. I've always said mixed race, and a bit like what Faith was saying, like coloured. Also, it makes me feel a bit weird. But mixed race is what I would most commonly use for myself. And also, like Sam said, sometimes I would describe myself as being black as well. But I think that's mostly also because people don't recognise me as mixed race. So sometimes it's just easier to say I'm black, but most of the time I would say mixed race.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's same for you, Faith?
Yeah, same for me. And a lot of people did not have a clue that I was mixed race, because mixed race people are generally or tend to be quite a bit lighter than we are.
Yes.
So I'm always mistaken as somebody who's of Indian descent rather than black.
Oh,
It's been
really?
really interesting. Yeah. So I've always said I'm mixed race, black and white, to make that clear to people.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll get on to your mum and dad in a minute, and not in detail. I don't want you to spill beans about them or anything, but we will get onto that in a second. But I'm just thinking of people in my sphere of influence and in my church, and particularly some people even older than me. Do you know there are people 20, 30 years older than me in existence? That's amazing.
Really?
And I'm trying to think. I could probably now name a handful of those who would say, "Oh, to call a black person black is rude. I need to call them coloured." Right? And that's because in their mind and in their heyday, probably in the 70s, that seemed to be the done thing in Britain. And I wonder whether you would feel the need to educate or re-educate extremely old people or correct their language, or whether to you it really doesn't matter because they've been brought up a certain way. Where would you sit with that?
For me personally, I wouldn't correct them, because I think offence is something that is on you. If you know that person isn't trying to be offensive and you take that offensively, that's then the onus is on you as a person. So I've never been somebody who's easily offended, because you generally know when you're speaking to someone or around people what their intent is. If their intent is to be unkind or to, I don't know, to try and use a word in a derogatory way, then you would know that. I would then say something to them. But if, for instance, an older person had said, "Oh, I know this coloured girl," to me, talking about someone else she knows, I wouldn't correct them, because I know they're not trying to be offensive.
I was absolutely the same. I agree. And a little while ago, I was with my friend's parents, and and they were talking about someone they knew, and they said, "Oh, a coloured person," and then they looked at me straight away, like to be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry if I offended you," but I know that they weren't meaning it in an offensive way, so it was just like, "No, it's fine, you know, it's okay. I know what you mean. You're trying to express or describe that person, and that's the way you know how to do it." But like Faye said, if it's in, I guess it's in the way that it's said. Like if someone was like, "Oh, look at that coloured person," then it becomes a bit more offensive rather than just using it to describe someone when that's how you've learnt to do it, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying that you know, older folk or folk who've been brought up on a diet of TV programs and things in the 70s and learned that way to speak. I'm not saying that they can't be re-educated, but they sometimes you can see them if they're in a conversation and when they're about to say a word, and you can see fear in their eyes in case they choose a wrong word. And I always feel sorry for them, you know. And I guess on occasions I've probably been that person as well, when you just have a moment of mental aberration and correct terminology loses you and you're suddenly scrabbling, you know. Say, you know, I mentioned those three phrases at the beginning: multiracial, biracial, you know, mixed race, and there could be more. And your brain is suddenly scrabbling for the least offensive phrase, probably not realizing that they're going to bump into some nice people like you who aren't going to be offended anyway, right? Interesting. What do you say, Sam, to that? Do you correct many people at all who would say get the terminology wrong or outdated?
No. I wouldn't ever correct them if I know they're being sincere and like they're not meaning any rudeness by that. Unless they are, then I will correct them. So I've literally been called many horrible other names than coloured and stuff like that. So I would never take coloured as a offensive word or something like that.
Okay. Well, we'll come to some of your experiences a bit later. I do want to get to that because I think we need to get a little bit gritty so people can understand this is very real. But I did say we need to just get to your mum and dad. So yes, your dad Phil and your mum Julie. So come on, someone tell us about their ethnicities.
Yeah, so mum is fully British from Scunthorpe. Whoop, represent. And our dad is black from Ghana. So very two different cultures, but it works. Yeah.
And they got married in what year?
Oh.
Do you remember? Have a guess. Come on.
I'm gonna guess 1989.
Okay.
It was 88.
Or 80. No, could be.
Okay, 88 or 89. And your dad from Ghana, your mum from industrial north of Britain. And do you, and I don't want you to speak for them here, but have you come across or heard from them how they felt at that time? Because again, we're going back a fair way, right? And I mean, I remember, obviously, I grew up with your mum, so I remember that whole moment, but I don't particularly want my perspective on it. But have either your mum or dad talked about that period and how they felt at that time?
I wouldn't say that they've directly said this is how people responded to us, but I know during that time, Scunthorpe, Lincolnshire, the north, predominantly white, and to have a black man in a predominantly white town is kind of a big deal back then. I know my dad has spoken about his experience as an individual in terms of in the workplace. He definitely said there was racial prejudice against him during that time, but in terms of them being together, they haven't spoken about that time. I know that my grandma actually introduced or told my mum to go and sit next to my dad in church. And so I thought that was very progressive of my grandma
Yeah.
to do that. Massively progressive. She kind of didn't think about, oh, he's black. I wouldn't want my daughter to be with a black man, as a lot of people would probably, disapprove of that kind of relationship. But the fact that my grandparents actively encouraged that makes me really proud. So I'm not sure what kind of reactions they got when they were together as a couple, but I know that Dad had racial prejudice as an individual.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, maybe that's a conversation I should have with your dad at some point about that side of his life and his experiences. Tasha and Sam, have you heard anything from Mum or Dad about how sort of as a couple they were greeted by people, or the experiences they had with people?
He hasn't actually talked about their relationship, what happened have they ever been racially profiled together and stuff like that, or any of that. No, they've never really spoken to me. That literally the same as Faith and Tasha. He's just spoke to me as an influencer, saying of his experience and kind of guiding me in the right direction,
Yeah. Well, I think they've probably protected you from some of the things. Now, I don't necessarily mean that lots of people might have been upfront and cruel to them, but I would think they would have heard or overheard some nasty things said. I'm sure, and even then, I'm quite sure that I overheard conversation with people saying this can't last. There's no way this will last. This will just be a thing, Whether people were thinking, what are these good-looking Ghanaians coming over and stealing our nice white girls? I don't know. But so I'm sure that they will have encountered something, and it's probably good that they've sort of taken a protective role over you there anyway.
Quite nice to hear now. If we were to approach them and ask, it'd be quite good to have that conversation now.
I think so, and particularly, of course, for you, Faith, I think, because you've only recently been married. So how long have you been married now?
Yeah, so I've been married about 1.5 years. It'll be 2 years in November.
Wow.
So just over 2 years, just coming up to 2 years. So,
and Steve is white.
He is. He's a Yorkshireman.
Yeah, and you were together in obviously a different era than your mum and dad. But I would be interested. You don't have to spill lots of beans now, but just maybe in 2 or 3 minutes. Did you two encounter anything, or did you even see people respond in a different way and sort of overacting as if, oh, inside I don't feel right about this, but I'm going to say all the right things? Do you encounter that?
I wouldn't say so, no. Not personally. I've not seen anybody react negatively to the fact that I'm with somebody who is white. And I'm really grateful for that, actually. I feel like today's times are a little bit different when it comes to interracial relationships. They're a little bit more common now. You see lots of different races with other races, and I think it's beautiful. And sometimes you'll get people looking at you a certain way, and actually I would say, interestingly and maybe controversially, black women think it's a bit weird. Or they would give you like funny looks that you're with somebody who's white. So interestingly, on that side, it's the reactions I've had are probably more from black women rather than white people saying this is wrong or
That's interesting.
Kind of, yeah.
Have you noticed that kind of thing, Tash?
I mean, single.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. That would, could you imagine, or have you witnessed black women being more cruel, if you like, or catty? Is that a word I can use to other black women who date white guys?
I haven't actually. I mean, a lot of my friends are white, so I haven't really been around many black women to really notice it. I guess before, when I was in a relationship with a white guy, I did notice looks, but it was just from everyone. It wasn't a particular race or gender that looked. It was just everyone. But I didn't take it as a racial thing. I mean, I guess in some ways it is, but I think more for his sake, it was kind of more pointed towards him, like, oh, like, because he's quite skinny and geeky looking as well. So it was a bit like a funny combination. But yeah, I haven't experienced it too much, no.
Okay. So, hey, what do you think of the phrase colourblind? Because, you know, you guys, you're married to a white man, right, Faith? And the other two have dated white people. You are clearly as close to being colourblind as someone is. It obviously didn't matter to you, did it, that these people were white? Yeah. If you were to bump into someone nowadays, a guy like me who you didn't know, and they say, I'm totally colourblind, would you believe them?
No.
Okay.
I think
because it is a loaded question, and so go on, tell me why, because I'm interested.
I think being colourblind is to disregard somebody's culture, because where you're from defines how you are, your culture, your customs, and to just say you're colourblind is to say, well, everybody's exactly the same, and they're not. And it's about, rather than being colourblind, it's about accepting somebody for who they are, no matter what colour they are, and actually being proud of where they come from and what colour they are, rather than just putting everybody in the same block and just being like, okay, well, there's no differences. I don't see what's special about you because you're like everybody else. And actually, if I met somebody who said that they were colourblind, you would immediately think, well, you're wrong. You're not colourblind, because there is unconscious bias that goes on all the time in people's minds. And you immediately, no matter who you are or what colour you are, if you meet somebody new, you've already created a judgment in your mind about them on their looks. So to say you're colourblind is to say that actually you don't feel any kind of way when you meet somebody, and that's actually impossible.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you...
No, and if someone uses, if they were to say they're colourblind, you would feel that they're maybe trying too hard to say something to you, but also that they're missing, I was going to say, they were missing what defines you, but I know none of us are defined by one thing, but it's a part of what describes you, and it is part of your definition to be black mixed race. So if they say they're colourblind, they're actually denying you your experiences and background. Is that okay? That's interesting.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. So you mentioned a phrase on subconscious or unconscious biases, right? Which is a very interesting phrase and leads us on now maybe to some experiences you've had of that. And I'm very interested in hearing this because none of you yet have lived a really long life. But already in your short, youthful lives, I assume that you have come across, and I could be wrong, so correct me, incredibly harsh racism and more subtle unconscious biases, and probably everything in between. Or you may surprise me and say, no, I have no idea what you're talking about, Russ, and that's fine. But would you be willing to share anything you've encountered like that?
Yeah, I think for me, I've not really experienced anything really harsh or I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's all been very subtle, more just looks. I get it more more when I'm out with my mum. I don't know why I'm crying because,
It's okay.
I think
It obviously matters.
Yeah, I think I've always been very conscious of it, and that's the thing I think that hurts the most is people making a judgment on you. Oh, sorry, making a judgment on you before they even get to know you, and it's just more like when, say, we're out shopping with mum, and obviously she's white, and if our dad isn't with us, then that is when we get the most looks, and people will stare. It's not just a quick it's like a proper stare around the shopping centre or down the street. And I guess it's not all racial. I think it's more they don't understand or they want to know what the relationship is there. So I was talking about this the other day with Sam and Mum actually, and we both said that we tend to call Mum like on purpose, so that people understand the relations that are there, instead of just getting confused and just staring. But it does bother me because it makes what saddens me more, I think, is that it bothers me this much just having this small amount of racism towards me, and then other people, what they go through, it breaks my heart, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And do you think that, I mean, I assume you use the word mom. I'm just trying to think, and I may be thinking too logically here, because people might think, oh, I wonder if you're adopted. I wonder if that lady used to work for Save the Children in Africa or something, came back with a little black baby or something. People will be piecing together and having these internal conversations.
Yeah.
And so you call mum just to make it as clear as possible of that relationship. But I am interested that the looks and the staring cause you to feel the way you clearly feel, Tash, because it does matter. And do you think the stares, is there something behind the stares? Is there a judgment behind the stares, do you think?
I think not always, but a lot of the time there is. It's it just makes me feel a bit self-conscious, and a lot of people would say that I'm a bit paranoid anyway, but I always notice a lot of things that happen around me, whereas other people might not see things, and I tend to see a lot of things. So when I see them, I feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me or I'm not accepted. That kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Tash. Thank you. Hey, I'm going to come to Faith last on this one because she's lived the longest, right? Now, just before I move on to Sam, am I assuming then, Tash, that because Sam's going to tell me that he's been called all manner of names in a second because he let slip that earlier. Have you not been called all manner of names?
Not to my face. I may have done behind my back.
Okay.
I think probably the worst thing I've ever heard anyone call me is a Paki. And that got on my nerves even more because I'm not from Pakistan, so I don't understand why they would say that. But I know that it was meant in a harmful way. So yeah. But that's probably the worst thing I've ever heard anyone say to me.
Yes. So not only was it a racist comment, but they got it completely wrong anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sam. The framework of the question was, this range from sort of really racist comments and actions through to, the more subliminal kind of subconscious biases, etc. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So, yeah, I've been, like I said earlier, I've been called a lot of different names, very harsh words, but I don't really take offense to that. Like, I mean, cool, if you're going to be racist, like, fair enough, just like, do it, but I just think that they're low, and they clearly don't think properly before they speak. But yeah, so I've experienced it in school. Looks wise, like with people giving me looks and stuff. I mean, I do kind of see people look at me, but then I just kind of just stare back until they look away. That's just my mindset. If they're going to do it to me, then I'll do it back to them. Yeah, so I mean, I would say strong in that, in knowing who I am and where I come from, because I love being a black person and a mixed race person. I love having the two different worlds combined. Because there's a lot of, I would say, like African culture in me, and there's a lot that I would love to learn more. And I love also being having a white mum, because there's also certain things that I can learn from there, and I have white characteristics, I would say. But yeah, so I have experienced looks and stuff and subtleness, especially in work, actually, being a builder. You don't really get that many builders that are mixed race or black or like that. So sometimes you do get looks, but it is what it is. So
I mean, you sound quite thick-skinned, and I don't know whether to sort of read how you're talking to me as you're super strong, Sam, both physically and emotionally, or whether there is a bit of bravado there. I don't know. I assume somewhere in there is a softness that can be heard.
Oh yeah, I would say I'm quite a soft boy. I'm very.
I mean, have you ever been disadvantaged by racism on occasions when you've not been able to deflect it?
Maybe in work, like just getting like, so like I was wiping a window, and I haven't cleaned the inside of this new window that we put in yet. And he's coming up to the window, like pointing at loads of stuff. He's moaned a couple of times behind my back to my colleague, who is a white man. And yeah, and thankfully he was quite a good friend of mine as well. He was quite an older man, in his 50s and stuff like that. And he came up to him again and said something about the door, like he hasn't wiped it properly. But I had. And so he actually turned around and kind of backed me and was like, look, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to back off. He's only a kid. Like, he's just doing what I've told him to do, you know? So I would say there, it being disadvantaged.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Faith, what about you?
I've always had this knowing that because I'm mixed race, I get off lighter than if I was black. And I don't know, I've always known that inside, and nobody's taught me that. So it's obviously learned behavior. When I was younger, like Tasha, so I was just in a playground and someone, another kid picked up sand, threw it at me and called me a packy. And I'm like, you know, fight or flight, I'm a fight kind of gal. And I was like, I'm not even a packy. It's like Tasha said, I was like almost more offended that he called me something that I'm not. And so that's the only direct racism I've had to my face. I think it's definitely changed as we've moved around. So obviously for people listening, our family moved quite a lot. So we were born in Scunthorpe. I was 7 when we moved. We moved to Surrey, lived in Chessington. We were there for about 7 years. Moved then to Hertfordshire, then to Kent, and a couple of places in Kent. And through those moves, I went to 3 different secondary schools. And secondary school is not the kindest place to be as a kid. My first secondary school in Surrey was great. I really loved it. I had friends who were different races. There wasn't too many people of colour, but I always knew who they were. It's funny because we always knew who the other people were that had backgrounds. So in primary school, there was me, Tasha, and 2 other black girls, and we were friends with them. And then in secondary school, I had a friend who was mixed race, but most of my friends were white, and so I didn't really tap into the other side of myself. Didn't have any other black friends. Dad didn't really have black friends, and because we moved a lot, it was like hard to find and keep relationships with people. Hertfordshire, I say, was probably the most difficult place for me personally. I found it really difficult. One of those reasons is because it was year 9, so people had already got their groups of friends and kind of felt like you were infiltrating, but it was all very subtle, the behaviours that I saw. I knew it was racism. They didn't say horrible words, but you just know, like when you're in that position, you know people are kind of outcasting you because you're not like them. And there wasn't any other black people that I could remember. So that was a really, really tough time. And when we moved, it was such a relief to me because it was such a horrible environment to be in. And like I said, I've always I'm very, what I call it is westernized. If you were to speak to me on a phone, you wouldn't know what color I am. So I feel that has kind of opened doors that maybe wouldn't have been opened otherwise. And I've just always known that. I've always been polite, very smiley, enthusiastic, high energy, and I don't have an accent. We don't have a hard name to spell. Some people say it differently. Otter, we've had before, but it's 3 letters. So it wasn't really intimidating to people. But I know there are people who are a lot darker than I am, who maybe have an accent, that have a completely different experience. And like Tasha said, that is what's so hard. And I've often been in a position where I felt really guilty or felt like I've got a job just because I'm nice, but if I had a different name or an accent, I wouldn't have got that job.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so many different experiences depending on how light you are, how dark you are, who you're around, where you are in the country.
Yeah.
When we were in Scunthorpe, apart from that one kid calling me a name, I did not feel racism at all.
Is that interesting?
Yeah.
Do you think moving around, in hindsight, has helped or hindered your experience of, racism or bias?
I think if we were to stay up north, it may have got worse as we got older. Having moved to like closer to the south, where it's more diverse anyway, I think we've probably escaped to. Well,
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, Sam's obviously had a really hard time, but
Sam, you weren't born in Scunthorpe, were you?
No, I was born in Chessington.
Yeah, I've got lots of pictures of the girls as tiny babies, but none of you.
Yeah, I'm used to it as well.
Have any of you been to Ghana?
No. We would all love to go, but we haven't had the.
Has your dad been back to Ghana?
He has been back a couple of times. Quite a long time ago now. I know he'd love to go back again. Not sure when, but yeah, he's always talking about it though, isn't he? And he refers to his family a lot and stuff. So.
And would you? What level of importance would you place on that for yourselves? Would it be just something nice to do, or do you think it would help you with, another part of kind of what defines you, if you like?
I definitely think the latter. It's on my bucket list because I feel like to be immersed in that culture would help me find another part of myself that I've not explored yet. I think more as I've got older, I've realised the importance of the Ghanaian culture. I really want to know where I'm from. I want to know where Dad grew up, what it was like for him, hearing stories and stuff growing up, and what he was like, and bunking school and climbing up mango trees and catching animals. And it sounds such a world away from what we know. So I think to go there would not only help me understand more about myself, but more about Dad and his culture and background, kind of put colours to a story that he's already told us.
Yeah.
I
feel the same as well. And I feel like also it's kind of only fair, I guess, because we've had all our lives of mum's side and knowing the white kind of culture we've been brought up in, that it would only kind of be fair to go and experience and meet our family and stuff. So I'd love to go.
Yeah, it's great. Sam?
I have a lot of cousins.
Yeah, sure.
So I've actually thought about this recently. I even just thought maybe even like just me and like Dad going, because I don't know about it, and even just going to like asking if he would like to go to Ghana or something, because I would say I've kind of tapped into the African side a little bit, just by watching other people on like YouTube or just hanging around with other Africans that I have done. I don't really have many African friends, but the African friends that I do, they have that culture that I kind of change a little bit into that kind of culture when I am with them. But yeah, definitely 100% want to go to Ghana, because it's such a cool place, and it's where Dad was born, where Dad lived, and he experienced so much fun and learned so much stuff and had so many responsibilities as a young person that I feel like we take for granted, just as we like get given everything, really. You know, he had to work for things, like for everything, really. So
Yeah.
it'd be really
And
cool.
that's probably made a mark on him and who he is as well. And I
Yeah.
think it's helpful for you guys to see that. But and of course, this day and age, I guess, once the whole lockdown and COVID-19 season is all over, however long that lasts, you know, why not family trip to Ghana?
Yeah.
You know, and just
That'd be great.
just explore that. That would be great, wouldn't it?
I
Hey,
think
look, yeah, go on.
I think it'd be very emotional.
Mm.
I'm sure.
To go there. Yeah.
I'm sure it would. Yeah. Look, one thing we've not mentioned a great deal, but it'd be good for us to just end on this because I know time is precious. Is you also grew up, all of you, in what I like to call a countercultural situation, which is that of church. And we believe, don't we, that as Christians, as followers of Jesus, that we're not some kind of strange subculture, but in a sense, Jesus with his values and his ethics was trying to turn the world the right way up. And therefore, there's a sense that we are countercultural. Having said that, that doesn't mean that people in the church, and even good Christians in the church, are not reflective of the biases that are in society by nature of the fact that, you know, all church people, all people trying their best to follow Jesus, have at one time been not church people. And therefore they've been carved a certain way, and of course may still work amongst, you know, people who aren't in church, etc. So I guess what I'm getting to is there are lessons for church folk and for churches to learn in this season. And as a pastor of a church, I don't want to ignore the pace of change in discussion that's come about because of the George Floyd traumatic incident. I don't want to ignore that because what it has shown is that part of the world is hurting, and in his wisdom, God has allowed that hurt to be revealed. Okay. Now, you've all admitted that there are people out there, mixed race, black, who have had far, far worse experiences than you. And I wonder if, and I know I'm dropping on you here, but I wonder if you would have any tips or words of wisdom to church leaders or into churches about how to recognize what's going on in the world now, and how to maybe be more reflective of that in the churches that we lead. Okay, so you guys have been up to the church where I'm privileged to be a pastor, and we have black and we have mixed race people in the church. But you would largely say this is a white church. Okay, I assume you would say that with a white leadership team, etc. And so, you know, I'm not asking you to be severely critical, although you can be if you wanted to be. You know, what can church, say with a capital C, learn in this period that if we don't learn it in this season, we've maybe missed an opportunity?
I'll start. So actually, I'm a youth leader now for Glasshouse, and so we actually had about 6 weeks of talking about this, and there was a young black girl that said, use your white privilege to recognize when someone of a different color or ethnicity is being treated wrongly, and to call them up on that. And it's safe, it's your friend, take them aside, don't do it, make a scene of it, because that's not, you don't want to make a scene because it blows up. But use your white privilege, or just at least say something and stand up for that person, because sometimes it is scary and sometimes it is hard to do, but it's something that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you, Sam. That's good. And so you did a series on that throughout the church or throughout the youth in particular, was it?
Yeah, so throughout the youth, just
okay,
on Zoom.
oh, great. Oh, well done you. Well done you. It's brilliant. Great. Go on, girls. I'm looking at you now.
For me, I'd say the church has to be leaders in the field. We are ambassadors of Christ, and if we are falling short, how do we expect others who don't know him to fight for equal rights for men and women, to be inclusive of people of all ethnicities, ages? It can, we're talking specifically about the Black community now, but actually if we look, we're very prejudiced against lots of different people, whether they're poor or rich, or where they live, what clothes they wear. And I've got a passage here, Romans 12, 9. It says, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong, hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honouring each other. And if we as Christians take that upon ourselves as an individual responsibility, not only, because it's a good thing to do, but actually that's what our commission is, to love our neighbour. So to create that conversation in church, and to have people in leadership who reflect the congregation, so that you have a diverse range of points of view, and it's not all whittled down to just one race, because even you can say, oh, being white is one race, but there's lots of people from different countries with different cultures. They're all white, but they all, they live differently, and they understand things in a different way. So I think as Christians, we have a massive responsibility in the church to be the light in the world, and like Sam said, to call out injustice, because we're ambassadors for Christ, and we have to realize that responsibility that is on us, not just to be inclusive of people who are Black and ethnic minorities, but from people from all ages and races, and whether they're rich or poor or whatever, we're all children of God. And if we realize that and have compassion for those around us, it will look like a very different world. And actually the church is a massive voice. There's billions of Christians in the world. It doesn't matter what denomination you're from, we all believe in the same God. And if we all take it upon ourselves that we can make a difference, we can stand up for those who don't have anybody to speak on their behalf, the world is going to look like a different place. So it just starts with conversation, and starts with looking at yourself. What can I do to make things better? How can I be a light in the world? So yeah, that's what I was saying.
Love that. Brilliant. Thank you, Faith.
I think, Faith touched on it. I think nowadays churches can be very much categorized into different cultures. So like you're saying, some churches might be predominantly white, some might be just called a Black church and have predominantly Black people. Some might be Asian churches and have mostly Asian people. And I think people kind of get, and sometimes in churches, you go to what is most comfortable. So I think for what Faith was saying about having diversity in the leadership is really key. I mean, like in our church, for instance, our pastor is a woman. So, I mean, that is quite a big statement on its own.
Yeah.
And she's also, I think, from West Indies. She's got her dad, I think, is West Indian. So she's also mixed race. And there's loads of different, what word am I looking for? Like, representatives, I guess. So we've got people from India, we've got people from Mauritius, we've got people like me. I'm the youth leader, I'm mixed race. My dad is a youth, not youth pastor, assistant pastor who's black. And I think that really has begun to impact the congregation, because it did start out as a predominantly white church, and through the years we've seen maybe a quarter to half of the church now be interracial or different cultures, and it's great. And I think that kind of needs to be shown a bit more through other churches. So
yeah, that's great. No, I love that.
Yeah, accessible to one culture. It's accepting of it all.
Yeah, no, that's important. I get that. Hey, thank you very much. That's good. And I want to thank you for your time. I've taken far too much of it. We've been over an hour, but I've thoroughly loved chatting with you and hearing things I wouldn't have thought of. And Faith, pursue that music and that singing and that songwriting with Steve. Seriously, go for it. It's going to be great. And Tash, what's it called? YGM Dance Academy. YGM Dance Academy. You go for it, girl.
Thanks.
All right? Get it out there. Let's get it known. And Sam, 2 years in Southport. Wow, you're going to turn that place upside down. Make the most of it, Sam.
100%. I will, yeah.
Make the most of it. It's exciting. And keep keep watching whatever it is you're watching on YouTube to help you embrace your Ghanaian side. That's great.
Thank you. I will. Don't worry, I will.
Fantastic. So, hey, thank you all for taking the time. Viewers, thank you for watching. I hope there's been something helpful for you today. God bless you, and goodbye.
Bye.